So today on Culture Architects, we're talking with Brian Roers. Brian's the co-founder and owner of Roers Companies. Roers Companies is a multifamily and a commercial real estate development firm based in Plymouth, Minnesota, in the Minneapolis area. It was founded in 2012 by Brian and his brother Kent. Last year, the company was recognized by Inc. 5000 as the 344th fastest growing private company in America. And they've got over 400 people now. So this, and across 14 different states. So this is a big company that's really grown and grown in a pretty significant way. And a big factor in that growth, not surprisingly, especially on this podcast, has been their culture. And so they've won a lot of multiple Best Places to Work awards and all kinds of awards for being a great company to work for. And I know Brian's got a really interesting story of how that happened and how he developed that and the lessons he learned. So Brian, we're really excited to hear your journey. Welcome to Culture Architects.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It's always fun to tell the story and, just show the people and what's gone on here. So we're really appreciative of you having us, and we're looking forward to a good conversation.
Excellent. So let's just, for our audience's sake, Brian, just give us a little bit of history. Go back to, as I understand it, you were a CPA first, right? And you were in that business, and somehow you said, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to switch gears. How did that happen? Tell me that story.
Well, you almost got to go a half a step farther back is to really go. So my brother and I grew up out in Southwest Minnesota, so rural area.
Okay.
Just really with, people, hard work, agriculture area, everything from working on farms to small businesses. That's just how we were raised. Mm-hmm. And obviously everybody knows, the businesses are as good as the people that make it up. So from age zero, pretty much our family is in the ag world and in business. And mm-hmm. So we've always known that. Fast forward to, I went up to college, found out I could get a accounting degree and a management degree. Mm-hmm. And so really came right out of the chutes with, I was first a manager degree, and then I added on the accounting degree. I never dreamed of going into accounting, to be honest.
Okay.
But as I came out of St. John's, where I was at, small private school in central Minnesota, they were looking for accountants. So that's when I went to KPMG, a Big Four accounting firm, mm-hmm. and really, I landed there and really enjoyed it. I mean, just the people, the numbers, everything was great. So that was my first start into accounting, was at a Big Four CPA firm.
But didn't you also create your own accounting firm after that too?
Yeah. So, learning, I went from there to another small firm, mm-hmm. learned, culture along the way. Mm-hmm. And then, started my own. So another lady and I partnered up, and we started a firm, 50-50 joint venture. Mm-hmm. We did mostly healthcare clients in those days. Mm-hmm. I think we had 13 people was our max. Mm-hmm. I guess we did that for 9 years. I owned that CPA firm.
Wow. And so what led you to say, all right, I've had this career in accounting so far, I'm going to do something different? And why real estate?
Yeah, there's two different variations of it. One, I was traveling a lot mm-hmm. with the CPA firm. My business partner was, different phase of life. She was 60. I was 30 at the time. And then the same time, my brother and I had always dreamed of working together. He's probably better, I would say, at the sales and that side of the business, still very good with numbers. I love numbers, the finance, and then working with the people. And so that was really it was kind of a collision of wanting to do a bit of a career change. The opportunity was there. We saw a big need for housing, and we had been doing real estate on the side.
Okay.
So I would literally nights and weekends, we were doing single family, lease to owns, flips, but a lot of housing on the side, as we always said. Mm-hmm. And so we just kind of flipped our day job and our night job. At that.
I decided it was time to make this a business. So was it just the two of you, and then you started to hire some people, or what was the beginning of that company?
Yeah. It was just the two of us at the time. We had some contractors working with us. And what we saw was there was a need. People needed housing, number one. And then people were always asking for investments. And so my mm-hmm. brother is in the financial planning side. He's a certified financial planner. And people kept asking him about, how do I invest in real estate? How do I get into mm-hmm. real estate? And this was really our avenue to get in, was by using personal investments to create the housing that we knew were in demand. Mm-hmm. And that was really the crux of it. It was Kent and I, just the two of us. I always joke, the visual was, we would drive everywhere we went. I was sitting in the passenger seat on my computer, and Kent was in the driver's seat talking on the phone to a bank or to an investor or to somebody trying to get the next deal done.
Uh-huh. So, and what year was that you started the company?
2012.
So just to be clear, so from 2012, it's you and your brother driving around in your car, typing notes and on the phone, and 12, 13 years later, you've got 400 people.
That's correct.
That's a lot of growth. And so where in that path did it first occur to you? And this might have been even in your previous career in the accounting world, but somewhere along the line, you had this recognition that, you know what, the culture really has an impact here. Where did that come from, or how did that strike you?
I think the biggest thing, obviously you're right. You learn from the past, and being at the CPA firms that I was at, and even doing the real estate, as we said on the side, you're always involving people. You can only leverage yourself so far when it's two of you. And so we started early on hiring, we always said we hired the best people and tried to find the best partners in it. And it's really, we started doing that. I would say then along the way, what we did to really help harness us all was we put in what we call EOS, but the Entrepreneur Operating System based on the traction booklet. And what that really does is it really gives your teams the tools they need. It gives them the vision, the values, the strategy. It gives them kind of everything they need to succeed. And it almost is, you wake up 12 years later, here you got a company with 400 people in it. And so I can't look you in the eye and say, we started out 12 years ago and we said, or 13 years ago, we said, we're going to be at this many people. But it's happened, and it just happens through growth. It happens by giving people the tools they need, being very defined in where you're going and what you want to do. And really, obviously just harnessing those teams to provide the growth, because that is truly where it comes from.
So I saw an article, I don't remember what newspaper magazine it was about your company. And as I recall in the article, it talked about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the gist of what I picked up in the article was there was a period in which you were growing fast and maybe didn't pay attention to your culture the way you wanted, and things didn't go as well. And then you said, hey, wait a second, we got to relook at this thing. Is that an accurate story, or tell me what was that story?
Yeah, it's absolutely accurate. Part of it is when you're a growth company, this is what we had to learn along the way. Love it if I can pass it on. But, growth comes in different stages and it's different people. And so some of the people are there for the long haul. Some of the people are there and they want to do that segment of the business. And so what happened is we started it in 2012. We ran it up. We put the EOS system in place, which what it did for us is we set goals. We said, we want to be at this many units by this time frame. We want to have this much real estate and this many people in the team. And so we kind of laid out those goals, and they were truly just wild dreams. And as we got trucking along on those goals, what I say is 2017 happened. And as we really defined who we were, where we were going, we looked around and the team wasn't quite geared right. So we really had to go to work that day and really make sure we had the right team with us. And so there's a group that was here back in 2017. They really wanted to grow, wanted to keep going. There's a group that's not. And it was a really hard time for us because you have to really define who you are, who you want on the team, and who's really aligned with what vision you're pushing forward and how you're going. And so I think we started 2017 with 22 people in the corporate office. We ended with, I think, the same number of people, but 11 of them were the same people.
Wow.
So you really got to define who you want, who's the right team members. But that's what really set off that quest to never miss that again in those growth spurts. And we truly did. I know coming through 2020, coming through those COVID years in 22, we had a really big year. We kept saying we're not going to lose track of what we did and what we missed in 2017. We're going to hire ahead if we can. We're going to hire the right people, even though we're screaming for talent and need it. We're probably going to have to pay more for that, to get those people on board. And that's what happened through those time periods.
Yeah. I've certainly seen that in my own career, that companies that stay focused on hiring the best people and developing those people ultimately are going to be the best off. And to your point, some of the people that got you to a certain point aren't the people that are going to get you to the next point. Some of them will grow with you, and some it's not the right fit. And saying, and this is what I hear in what you're saying about the 11 who didn't make it, the 11 of the 22 who didn't make it to the next level. Certainly one of the things I've seen and experienced and taught many times is saying that somebody isn't the right fit for what you're going for doesn't make them a bad person. it's
Mm-hmm.
just not the right fit. That's, you've got a vision for what it is that you're creating, and you've laid that vision out. Some people will be a wonderful fit for that vision, and some people won't be a fit for that vision, and they should work somewhere else.
And that's absolutely true. I mean, all of them, I think, are very successful in doing what they're doing. And part of that is just you're defining where you're going and what you're doing. And that really, I mean, I don't even think we didn't go select the people. Most of them self-selected out and just said, hey, you know what? I like what you're doing. It's just not for me. It's not my future. And we were like, that's fine. I mean, we always celebrate that when that happens. We want people to be successful wherever they're at. And there truly are different organizations that are geared differently. And that's fine. That's part of where we just try to be very defined. We want everyone to be on par with where they're at. We don't want any surprises.
Yeah.
And so that's what we worked really hard on, kind of since that time frame of being crystal clear of who we are, where we're going, what we want to do. We did I think it's called OCAI, but we did an assessment here a couple of years ago of what is our culture and how is it geared. And it was really neat. It was a tool, and it used different companies out there, right? Like, I'm going to describe them just for visual sake, but very successful companies like Walmart, like Amazon, right? Like Apple, all very different companies with very different cultures.
Very different.
What this tool did is it put each of those companies in a quadrant, and then you kind of scored what your points were inside of that quadrant and what you wanted to be more like. And so we were able to truly visualize what our culture was. And then we went one step farther and said, hey, what do we want it to be? Because it's never perfect, right? Is it perfect? No. Interestingly, we tweaked it a little bit, but we didn't change it materially. We just tweaked a couple of points on it and said, this is what we want for our culture. And we're going to put all of our tools inside of that.
Yeah, I was doing a talk yesterday as we're doing this recording. I was doing a talk in Boston yesterday, and somebody in the audience asked me about this woman was she was the chief human resources person for a company, so she wasn't the CEO.
Yep.
And she was asking me about who should define the culture, because in her company she was concerned the CEO and the leaders were defining what that culture was, and some people weren't a good fit for that. And I was trying to help her to say, yes, that's how it's supposed to be, that it's your job as a leader to say, this is the culture we're building, and some people it might not be the right fit for. But it's interesting how often, I talk about often, that one of the biggest mistakes companies make, in my view at least, in this kind of work is being too collaborative. It's not that we don't care what everybody else thinks, but at the end of the day, it's you and your brother deciding what your vision of what the company is. And the more clear you are about that, the easier it is for people to decide whether they're the right fit for that or not.
Absolutely. And that's what we've tried to do. I don't have an example of it here, but we have a culture blueprint that we put together. We did our first version a couple of years ago, and then we just came out with our most updated version. And it literally walks through, here's our culture, here's our values, and here's what they look like, and here's what they don't look like. And literally, like, if you're an individual, and it breaks it apart even then into like individual contributors, managers, and then, higher level leaders. So just, this is what it looks like. This is how we act. This is how we operate. We just want to be crystal clear to put a tool out there, just really saying, this is from us, to your point, as owners and leaders of what we see the culture and what the values are.
Yeah.
And let everybody get on board. And even to the extent where, the other thing I know from your mention of it, the way you do that too is, so we have a culture index. So we pay, I would say, a significant amount of money, but to test people and like, just look at what their makeup is. And then we share with them what ours is. And I'll say, hey, here's my culture index as a leader. Here's how I'm going to lead this organization. And do you want to be a part of that? And here's what your culture index looks like. Here's how it fits. There's no right or wrong answer, but here's how it fits. Here's how you're going to be stressed. If you're somebody who's super system oriented and you love, to keep the systems going, we need that on this. When you're a high growth company, we need that, but it's not going to be easy for you because this is the way we're geared. So yeah, just really tools are what we've really liked putting out there, very tangible, visual, presentational things that our team can grasp and see and know that they're on the right train.
So how do you've sounds like you've done a fabulous job of defining with a tremendous amount of clarity what you want your culture to be and who you are and what you're about and where you're going. Beyond just printing that, how does that get taught in your organization on a day-to-day basis? I come to work for you and I'm just doing my job. how does that show up for me? Where am I learning that?
Great question. So going back to even you talked about the myths of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that came out of that when I think it was probably roughly 2018, 19, but we had somebody sit back one day and say, hey, what's your legacy? Like, what do you want to leave?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I was probably 40 years old, or to count my math backwards. So roughly.
You're not good with numbers anyway. So
Yeah, right. I'm not looking for legacy. I mean, we're just in the middle innings of having a blast here.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we said is we love leadership. We love seeing, I'm like, if I could walk out of here someday and the leaders take everything on and it's being run by a leader run organization, that'd be my day. Like, that's what I love. And so we kind of started filtering that into the culture more so that day. And so answering your direct question, so what we do is we have a lead program where we put, some of our higher level leaders into a 6 or 12-month program, and they meet monthly and they go through different concepts. We have this lead PMTQ for our middle level managers. We do coaching and coffee. So we have a coach that comes in once a month over lunch or over coffee or over a break time and does a quick session on, different concepts, different tools, whether it be stress management or how to lead people or, how to know thyself or different concepts there. We actually have a professional coach, basically on staff that right now, I think she's coaching 34 of our different leaders. And so we just put a big emphasis around training, as well as probably going back to that EOS system that really has a framework that really exemplifies all of the values of it, in that, as part of the EOS system, like even for me, I do a once a week check-in with each one of my direct reports. And then once a week, I have what we call an L10 or a level 10 meeting where we go through kind of the quarterly goals that we have, what are the issues we're dealing with. And so it just really is transparent. The team's really learning what we're doing, how it's going about. And a lot of that's pulled through kind of a leadership filter, where part of the tools.
So what I hear you saying, Brian, is that developing your people is really important. And certainly part of the legacy that you want to live, if you do have a legacy. It's this idea that I've developed my people into leaders. And it sounds like you're doing some amazing things. I'm curious, perhaps more specifically about, so you've got a set of core values that you've done through EOS, and you built your frame, what did you call it? Your blueprint?
Values blueprint. Yeah.
Your blueprint. If I'm the average employee, you hired me and I'm new and I've been here for a couple of months, beyond the fact that you're developing me as a leader because I've got opportunities to do some of these things, how do I learn those values specifically? How does that get taught to me on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so it starts really early on in the process, and it should be in every interview. We always say we reward on them. So like every performer, we do an annual performance reviews. They're in there, but they're on the wall. But everybody has them on the wall, right?
Sure.
But we do really we walk by them, we talk about them, bench the values framework. It's just always been a really big part of what we are and what we do. And so we do hammer away at them. And we have issues, right? We bump into things, if a credit card comes into me and somebody needs to be reminded what ownership mindset means, right? Like we'll talk to them and we talk about that through the values. And, we see people dipping and we're like, hey, things got to get done. We got a lot going on out there. We need more from your department. We're going to really need you to be looking at that work ethic value, what that means. And so we do a lot of that with it. Trying to think of, but it is truly a big part of who we are and what we do. We try to be as transparent as we can about that, so everybody knows where we're at.
Yeah.
So funny example, we do once a year, we do what we call our ROCO awards. And so we'll do different awards for different things, the property manager of the year and, and there's an award for each one of the values and the overall team member of the year award as well. So
nice.
Again, every chance we get to celebrate him, we are trying our best to pound him from the top of the mountains.
Nice. So one of the things that I have talked about with many, many leaders is, and I'm sure you've seen this and you've seen it in your Vistage group, I'm sure, every company has points in their career or in their development in which they have a typically high-performing employee who is a lousy example of their culture or their values. And they grapple with, okay, how many times are we going to talk about this person in our management meeting or in our L10 meeting in your case before we eventually make the decision that they need to not be part of our company?
Yeah.
Tell me a story of when that happened for you. You don't have to give me the name, obviously.
Yeah, it's hardest when it's a leader too, when you got, and even a lot of times you'll have most of the values, but not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, we had it not too long ago, one of the leaders in our area, and we worked with it. And, truly what I always chuckle about, even Brother Kent and I had talked about it and wanted to really get the team involved in the decision so they can kind of almost learn from it, because it's one of those things that it's really hard to look at that side when you see them as performing on most of the aspects, but how that's impacting the team and not getting out there and doing what they really need to do. And in this case, it was truly this ownership mindset of really understanding the business and where we needed to encourage our team, how to keep them accountable, how to push on them to do their job and how to impact the firm. And it eventually ends up impacting the firm immensely.
Yeah.
And so you move it out, and then, then you get what took so long. And it's like, so we try to really be mindful of it when it comes up, and especially it should during performance review time. I mean, if you're not coaching and counseling always on values, it's really, that's really a miss. And so we try to really encourage that. But yeah, we all have that, right? Like I always love I always see the old timers, but the people like, oh, a bad hire is rude. We know that, but we all know it in the seat too. When you're in the middle of the storm and growth is happening like it is, it's really hard, but you have to do it. And so that we definitely do it. It's a hard one to stare down.
Yeah. And yet I always say it's certainly one of, if not the clearest message you'll ever send to the rest of the team who's watching this. Because for one, your failure to address that person after plenty of coaching and development, but at some point you don't get to be on the team anymore. And your failure to address that person is basically telling the rest of the organization, this stuff doesn't really matter. Especially if you bring in enough money or you sell enough business or have important relationships or whatever it is that has kept you from making that decision. And most of us take longer to make that decision than we probably should.
Yeah. Well, and we've had, what mostly happens is the team will acknowledge it, like, okay, well, it's about time. We saw it all the way along. And you're like, yeah. And then usually you can back your way and, well, we were working on it. We were doing this, because you can't talk about that at the time. Right. But like, normally we're able to recoup that pretty quickly with the team. And we say, look, this is what happened. We saw it. Just, we saw it all the way along. We were working on it. This is what we were doing. And we finally got this result. And normally they're like, we really appreciate it. Love that you were able to make that decision. And not an easy decision to make, right?
Yeah.
Like, they get it. And
that's
so
harsh.
We've always gotten more accolades from our team when we've done that than stress or putting other things aside.
Have you ever, not to dwell on getting rid of people, but have you ever had an occasion to get rid of perhaps an investor or a client or customer, whatever you call them, who wasn't aligned with the way you want to do business?
Yeah, probably our biggest one is, keep in mind, we're in the construction industry. So we've had 2 times where we've had construction companies, one that was just super harsh on our team. And I'm like, look, you can call me up and you can give an FU to me, but you don't do that to my team. And so we quit doing business with them. We had another one that obviously construction company tried to run a change order in a very dishonest way. We will never work with them again. And that's, we made a real point of that. That's on that side. I'm trying to think, we think I make sure we're sure.
You ever maybe have an investor who you were doing business with and decided, no, we're not going to do business with you anymore? Yeah,
I mean, absolutely. What we do is that we work with investments. That's a very, very personal thing. But most of our partners and investors, this is their, retirement funds they're working with. So they can get very emotional. They can get very siders when we try to work on things. We had a mistake happen inside of our office. We fixed it very quickly. The communication was not proper or appropriate on the other side. Like, look, that's fine. We don't need to do investments together. We really want to have the right team. We love it when investors cheer what we do. They see our team. They respect our team. That's what we want.
Yeah.
No, it does happen. I won't say often, but it's very common, I would say.
Right.
Especially from the investor side.
Well, and ultimately your willingness to forego the revenue, the relationship, whatever it is that they represent, tells the rest of your team how serious you are about this. That we're not kidding around. We're willing to forego that to make sure we're only working with people that are the best fit for us.
Well, and that's what's really interesting. In our sense, our team really has to get around that because we really do work a lot with friends and family. And so a lot of our investors are people, and they see it. I mean, literally, it's a neighbor calling me up to talk to me about, how my kids are doing, and me saying, "Hey, are you guys doing investments?" They're like, "Yeah, we're doing investments. Of course we are." I'm like, well, why don't we do those together? And so that goes into the team too. And then the team sees that. And so they know that this is family, this is like family to us. So they treat, in turn, going back to your point, they also treat our investors like family. I mean, the hugest integrity standards. And when there's a call to be made, our investors know how close our team knows how close these investors are. So they treat them with that ownership mindset, with integrity. They treat them with how we treat the team. They're treating our investors that way. And that's what we have to do.
Yeah, that's powerful. So when you are hiring people, you mentioned you use the culture index. Are there other tools you use to figure out who's going to be a good fit for your culture? Who's going to work here?
One of the ones that I use, we had a phrase we picked up years ago. We love people that are hungry, humble, and smart. But like, that's really what we're looking for. It really summarizes it. So, I mean, the culture index is the biggest tool for us to really tell who people are. And it's very, very accurate. We've very rarely seen it not be correct or spot on. And so that's a big one. Trying to think, like, we get histories of people, we'll try to do scenario analysis. We've had times when we've had people do projects saying, "Hey, if you're going to do this role for us, we'd like to see how you would treat this project or how you would do this," kind of a pre-work up ahead of it. And then really just ingraining them in the culture. The biggest part for us, more so than the time period before we pick them, is after we pick up. The last thing you want to do is hire somebody and then you run away and all they see is the HR department, So we try to be really, when somebody starts with us the first day, Kent and I or our leadership team try to meet them and say hello to them, get to know them more as an individual. I mean, I say it's stupid laws, right? I can't ask people any personal questions on the interview, but once they're working with us, we want to know who their families are. And we want to know where they have kids, how far they're driving to work, what do they do for fun? I mean, that's what's really a fun part of it. And then you get into that onboarding part where we're bringing them in. Normally they come in for a day, whether it's virtual or they're here, but they're going through our values. They're going through that EOS system. They're going through the blueprints, the culture indexes and all of that. And so that's the part we really, I would say, focus on almost more so than that pre-board. But once they're on board, how are we getting up to speed as fast as we can? Because we know that's how they're going to be a team member. And that's when you build that retention into somebody that's going to be here long-term.
Yeah. So when you've now spread into 14 different states, is that right?
Yes.
So
we're in 14 different states. We're very focused in probably 6.
Okay.
So I don't want it to sound more than it is, but it's really, we're very focused in 6 different markets across the U.S. And so we do have a spread out team. I'm assuming that's where.
Yeah, and that's where I was going. That what are some of the challenges that has created for maintaining your culture when you're that distributed?
Yeah, so I would say it's put some of our team on the road more than I'd like. So we are trying to be on the sites as much as we can. And so our leaders tend to carry that torch. And so they're flying to our different offices in Texas, Florida, Arizona. They're getting to the sites in the Carolinas, in Utah, in addition to the other markets. And so it's really putting people on site as much as we can to get that. And then really hiring and bringing on the team in that right manner, and that's what's really back to. So when we hire, what we want is we want to have our influence from Minnesota, but in Texas, we want local people there. We want people that are in that community that have relationships with the community. And so that means we really have to crank up our side of getting that culture into that office because we're bringing people on from other organizations.
Yeah.
And the other big challenge, as you know, and I'm sure where you're going next is with growth becomes, we have time periods that we'll ask people, raise your hand if you've been here for a year. And half the room raises their hand. And why? Yeah. That's because that's how fast we've grown.
Yeah. And
so with that, you have to be very vocal, very persistent on really being on what the culture is, what the values are, to making sure, because half the company's new. And so you really want to get them up to speed as fast, which is why, again, the tools, the passion and the training, as well as the onboarding. And those are probably the biggest things that really get that nationwide, as well as the growth and as new as everybody is.
Yeah. So what's the biggest, I'm going to call it a mistake, and I'll frame that by saying I totally get, and we all do, that, well, we learn from experiences. So some things don't go well and you learn, you get smarter as you go. But somewhere along the lines, I'm sure you've made a mistake or two that you said, oh man, what was I thinking? And in retrospect, it's like, that was such an obvious thing. I don't know what I was thinking, but now I'm a lot smarter from that. Like what, and specifically around building your culture, like what are some of the biggest faux pas or mistakes you made that you learned from?
I think the two, we referenced that time period where we really kind of retooled everything back in 2017. And that was where I always called that, firm mistake number two.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just, we didn't bring the team with us. And so, and that's where, through the growth since then, we've been very intentional about making sure we're bringing the team with us and what we're getting from that. So, that's what I would argue from the culture perspective is really that time frame. I can share with you other business mistakes that led to it. I think the other one was we rolled out that tool, the OCAI, to really study and understand what our culture was. We got kind of wide with it at first, and you had referenced it earlier even, but we had more people weighing in on it. And we found we really needed, Kent and I really needed to lead that standpoint of what we saw from the culture. Now, we did feel good about including the senior leadership team in that process of letting us set the vision, and then really kind of, in a sense, being part of the mission of it, of fine tuning it, tweaking it. And then we rolled that out to the greater team. We had buy-in from that team where we're going with it. So I would say sometimes you wide things out a little bit too wide, where you really got to be loud, set that culture, set that tone off the top of what you're looking for. So those would be the two I would probably list off.
When you, on the first of those, you talked about you hadn't really brought the team with you, and you're much better now about doing that. Describe more, what does that mean? What does it mean to bring the team with you, or what does it mean for the team not to be brought with you?
Yeah. So probably a couple real simple ones. Making sure you're hiring for where your growth and where you're going. We had continued to hire a group that was probably geared for a 20 to 30 person company at the time. And so again, great, to your point earlier, great people, right? They did really good in that, those mid-sized companies that weren't hugely growth. We always joke, we had somebody that we brought on board, and she had previously worked at a scope company, right? And we always joke, the scope, is, even on, different mechanisms, is the same one that they were using back in the days. The scope was on a ship, right? And so, she just, again, great person, didn't love change. And so as we kept changing things and things kept moving, they just don't succeed and they don't perform. And that's, again, it's not their fault. It's just what the company does to them. So it's really having the right team that's where you're going as a company, not where you're at today. So that's the thing. And then training them up, we had a time period here just recently where we've spent, training on, I'd mentioned the leadership training that we do. And we truly spend, it's probably $1 million a year between payroll time that goes into it, the leaders that we have in there, my time, but of our time of leadership training. And so then we have time periods like we have, right now, right, where we're in a really interesting real estate market. We've seen a little bit of slowdown. We're seeing a huge growth spurt in the next, 6 to 12 months. And so we have to have the team on board. And so we're going back to those leaders and saying, hey, we've seen some transition. We've seen some time. Now is the time when we need that investment we put into you as leaders.
Step it up.
We need you to get these teams going. We need everybody to be performing at the next level, not at the level we're at today. And that's been really fun to watch because they truly are doing it. They're truly stepping in. And we're seeing almost that return on investment, so to speak, the investment we've made in our team.
Right. There's something that there's a phrase that I've heard people say often, and I have a different twist on this phrase. And so I want to ask you about this. So you will often hear people say that, you're only as good as your people. And it sounds like a great thing. And my perspective on that is slightly different. And my perspective is you're only as good as your people perform. Because my contention is that the exact same people will perform differently in different organizations. In other words, if you take your 400 people and you put them somewhere other than your company and you put them in a different environment and a different culture, those exact same people would perform differently because the culture influences how the vast majority of them perform. I'm curious about your perspective on that. Does the culture change how those people perform? Would those people perform differently in your culture than somewhere else?
I think absolutely. I guess I like your variation on it of you're as good as your team performance. And we're very bold about that. I mean, we have the highest performing team. We know we invest a lot into them and they succeed. I mean, they're pulling through in all markets. And we tell them that, like, so somebody who starts with us, they know we're going to push for performance. I mean, I have my joke inside my office. I'm like, no one's ever come in my office and said, "Hey, I'm bored. I'm not feeling like I'm pushed enough." All the time people come in and say, "Hey, okay, how hard can we push?" Like, A, we never thought it was imaginable that we could accomplish this. And guess what? We did. But B, are you sure we can get to there? Like, and I'm like, that's when you really step up. But we tell teams, like, look, we're going to push you harder than you've ever been pushed before because we know you can do it. And when you do it, the accomplishment you're going to feel is similar to what we're feeling every day. I mean, I come in this office every day. I'm so proud. I'm so amazed by what we've accomplished that, and you can't not look at the teams and say that's what we've done, but it's because of how we've brought on the team, who we brought on, and how we encourage, motivate, train, teach them, do everything we do, because otherwise we wouldn't be where we're at. And that's the part where you go, you're only as good as your team. But I always love, Bill Gates had a statement that he made, and he said, people usually overestimate what they can accomplish in the short term, but they underestimate what they can accomplish in the long term.
That makes sense.
We see it day and day. Our teams are so high achieving that we get to our quarterly rocks, right? I'm always backing people. I'm like, we're going to get this done and this done and this done. Like, okay, guys, you're only one person I really appreciate, but I'm always pulling people back when they set their goals. But I can tell you, like our firm, right? We set a goal in 2017 to be at a certain point by 2025, by the end of 2025. We nailed it by early 2023, almost 3 years early. And so again, do we overestimate every quarter? We think we can do more. And we look back and I'm like, we accomplished way more than I ever dreamed or imagined.
Yeah.
That's how we try to train the team, bring them on, make sure they're seeing that, but just keep moderating that.
Yeah. One of when I talk about the team being the company performing only as good as the staff performs, I think about, and I often talk about this in my talks, there's an analogy that I use often that I talk about public high school sports dynasties, because they're really interesting to me. They're everywhere around the country. And if you think about in a public school, you don't get to pick your people because it's a public school, and you turn over your roster every single year. And yet you have teams that have been winning for 10 or 15 or 20 years because I contend they've built championship cultures that students come into that team and they realize there's a standard here to be upheld, and it causes them to elevate their performance. And I think it's just such a good analogy to what happens in a company. So have you had personal experiences? It could have been athletics, it could have been music, could have been military, other places outside of business where you perhaps had the experience of being on a really high level program, a championship kind of a team.
Wow. I mean, I've seen it, obviously. So I went to St. John's where we had a football program out there that our coach is the winningest coach in college history.
Wow.
Our program has won multiple national title games.
Yep.
It's a 2,000 kid school in central Minnesota that's out there playing teams. And so what you saw there is that it starts with the coach, right? It starts with the leaders, and then it's a whole program. And, like I compare it, again, I guess I suppose the other one you could use, my kids, right? You touched the chord that I have student athletes. And so I have 4 boys, all 4 play hockey, all 4 of them play lacrosse. But what you see in these programs is it's top to bottom though, right? It's the high school coach that's coaching the high school team, but he's also talking to the youth coaches who are getting systems down. And, where I'm a part of it, I'm just a measly youth coach. But I sit on, some of the boards and the coach, but you just see when you could ingrain that whole culture into that organization, that town, and it starts from day one, when they're back having fun in 2nd and 3rd grade, but you're teaching them the same methods and the same methodologies, and then you're treating them the same. And I think that's just such a part of it. as they come up through those systems.
Yeah.
I mean, like, going back to the example of the college I went to, they didn't hit in practice. And so it was a culture of, we're going to take care of you. You're a part of the team. We don't want to abuse you at practice. We don't want to abuse each other. Let's go abuse the other team. But let's save that up for Saturday. And so that was one of the neat things that they did. But it just, again, you're always taking care of the team. And I think that's what builds it. But it's such hard work, top to bottom. It takes countless hours and extra efforts that you got to put it in, and that's when you get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think about who knows whether hitting during practice is a good or bad thing, but regardless of whether it's a good or bad thing, the point is there's a way we do things on this team.
Yeah,
and championship teams, and it's true whether it's a sports team or whether it's a choral group or it's a dance troupe or it's a debate team or anything else. There's a way we do things on this team, and there's a standard that we have for how we're going to do it. If you're in a great choral group, I guarantee every one of those has a conductor that says there's a way we do things in this group, and they prescribe that and they teach it and they coach it. And if that doesn't work for you, you should probably be in a different choral group because this is the way we do it here. And it's that kind of a standard, in my experience, that changes the game for people. And I think you've done it in your company, and I've done it in mine, and seen thousands of others, where when you create that kind of a standard in a very systematic and intentional way, people come into it, and even unconsciously, some of it's conscious, some of it's unconscious, they come in and they know there's a standard at the Roers Company. There's a way we do things here. And they want to elevate their performance beyond what they would somewhere else. And I would be willing to bet that many of your staff, you've gone through it sounds like a very thorough process to pick good people. But I would be willing to bet that those same people perform at a higher level simply because of the standard that's been set in your company than they would perform if they worked in some other construction company or real estate development company.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's actually rare that we put all the systems in place to I would say, create accountability. We tell people ahead of time, like, this is what we do. Like, if you're going to come in here as a salesperson, we log all of our calls, we count all of our stuff. That's just what we do. It's rare that we have to push somebody to accomplish it. The normalcy is that you're like backing people off and checking to make sure that they're not overboiling. And truly, like, every one of my check-ins I started off with, how are you doing? Like, what's going on in your life? Like, how's the job treating you? Like, I want to make sure we're accomplishing your goals, your career aspirations, what you want to do. Because we do really feel like we owe it to our team. I mean, that's part of, one of the things, growth, we did learn a couple of years ago. What does growth do? Growth puts opportunities in front of the team. I mean, candid with you, I don't need more opportunity. We've got plenty of real estate. We're truly doing it because we want to put opportunities in front of our team. And if we see, if we don't keep growing, it's harder to do that. This is the way we know how to do it. And so we keep growing, we keep putting opportunities in front of teams, but that's normally what I have to do is like, hey, take a breath, right? Go home. You're done great. You're probably expecting too much out of yourself because that's the kind of people that we hire are the people that expect more than they know they can accomplish. And so, but that's been really fun to see. And that's, again, that's what kind of feeds the growth is when you're doing it for somebody else. It really is what feeds it.
You mentioned, coming from farms in Minnesota and sort of this is what I'm interpreting to be a kind of Midwestern work ethic type of mentality. I'm curious, as you have gone into other states, if they're not in the Midwest, do you see the same kind of, I mean, you can always find good people, but do you think from your perspective, there's a higher probability of people with that kind of farm mentality, work ethic in the Midwest than other places?
I mean, it's hard. I guess it's hard to comment on if it's so, because I mean, I think it exists everywhere. I just think it's a slender group of people wherever you're at. One of the euphemisms I always to comment on your ag roots. I remember growing up and farmers grew the corn, right? We had corn out in the field and it was going to rain the next day and we had to get our year's income in. And I'm like, there was no question, right? We just hauled all night long. We worked all night. And so I tell that story to people because I'm like, look, if the project has to be done and the investor needs it or the project needs it or the building needs it, like we just stay here till we get it done. Like
Yeah.
that's what has to happen. And so we just try to keep that culture going of how we were raised and brought up. And we have been able to put that in all of the different markets.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. It takes a lot. And you have to have a team that really wants it. But when you find that team that really wants it and they feel good about that too, that's what's given us the work ethic that we have on this team. And it truly is an incredible work ethic. I mean, our team work harder, they play harder. I mean, that used to be our value, was work hard, play hard. We simplified it to just work ethic. But our teams work hard, they play hard, they do life. And that's what's what you see.
So one of the questions that I hear often from leaders in the talks that I do is they'll ask me about the ROI, the return on investment on work on culture. And I know, and it's just ridiculously obvious. I mean, it's pretty obvious that if you've got a highly motivated, engaged group of people that care about what they're doing, they're passionate about what they're doing, they're going to do whatever they do better and whatever their role happens to be. And that's going to drive the success of the company. I don't know how you could not see that.
Yep.
Yet, having seen that, there are some, you were a numbers guy who want to know, well, what are the numbers? What are the, how do you measure that? How do you know that it's really having that impact? I don't have a need for that, but there are an awful lot who do. I'm sure you get that question sometimes. So how do you know, or do you care? Maybe you don't even care. But what's your thought on how do we measure the impact of this stuff?
Yeah, the way we've done, or one of the ways I do, is we really look into, the awards we've won. I go to these. I don't need an award for my sake. I don't need an award for what I've done, but it's when you're winning the top workplaces award because of the engagement, or because of the survey our team filled out. We win developer of the year 2 years ago, property manager of the year in Minnesota 2 years in a row. We were the largest developer. We put the most square footage in the ground in Minnesota last year. We were number 8 in Austin, Texas. When you're winning these awards, and it's because of the team, right? Like, and I guess if you want to quantify it, if you go look at my my payroll expense is the number one expense we have. And I don't know the exact number today because, back to your point, I don't really care because it doesn't matter. But at one time, our payroll was like 49% of our total spend. What does that tell you? Our biggest investment is in our people. And then when you go to the results we're getting are astronomical. They're out of this world. And people recognize it. People are seeing it, both from the top workplaces, people love being here, and to the fiscal financial ones of who's built the most, who's done the most. I think we were I don't even know because the numbers are at 12 on the multifamily builders, number 20 general contractor in the multifamily builders. And we've been around, we've been around for 12 years. And so, and then I go one step farther. You talk about a lot of legacy companies and how they treat their teams and how they do it. And that's why when we see these awards, we're so honored to be a part of that group, because you're up there with third generation companies, legacy companies that they know it's their people and they're the ones that put those emphasis in there. And so that's what really, really matters, is when you're in that group of people, you're winning those awards, and truly the awards are to the team. I went last Thursday night, we had another group, and I'm like, look, I don't need to be here for me, but I want the team to know that they earned this award. They won this because they're putting the efforts in. Yeah.
So as we come to the conclusion of our conversation, which has been fascinating, I'm always interested for everybody about, and I asked about this a little bit before, but I'm always interested in kind of lessons learned. And I always think we get to a certain age, a certain level of experience, and hopefully, and for most of us, we've accumulated some level of wisdom about what we do. And so if you were talking to the 22-year-old Brian Roers, who's just getting out of school and thinking about what's next for him, and probably had some picture of the world that may not have been all that accurate, what's the biggest piece of wisdom you would share with the 22-year-old Brian Roers?
I think it took us a while to figure out that we really needed to spend the money on the right people. And I think I've talked about the 2017. If we would have invested more earlier on, I think it would have come back stronger, faster. So I would say to Brian Roers, invest more I think the other one is sometimes, you're trying to protect your team so much that if you were more transparent on the process, I think the team gets it. And the part that I probably missed is they get to learn from it too. And so just example, you talk about the leader where you're channeling away and you're trying to get him in a spot and things aren't aligned. If you're more transparent with the team about what happened, how it went, I think they get to learn that lesson as well. And so we sometimes bucket it into protecting them, or we've got to be this hero out there. If you're just transparent and real with them and like, this is what happened, we missed it, should have been better on it, we're better now. So I think those would be the two things I would really say.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, Brian. I really appreciate you joining us. If people want to learn more about your company, where would they go to learn more?
Yeah, www.roerscompanies.com. We're there. Any Google search should be able to find us. Let's see, we're headquartered in Minneapolis. Anywhere about Roers is Roers, not
Great.
quite like the lion roars, but so that's how we spell Roers. So Roers at roerscompanies.com.
I will share that in the show notes as well for people. Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate you joining us. Fascinating story. Congratulations on all you've accomplished too.
You bet. Thanks so much, David. It was great. Super fun to share the story and just to share our team and share a little bit of our people's success with the world.
That's great.